Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Communities Live here on Sheffield Live 93.2 FM. Chris and Ellie here, and we have the horn singer, Johnny P. Taylor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chris. Thank you so much. It's been really lovely chatting with you off air, and I can't wait to do this interview.
So, thank you for joining me. We did try and do an interview before, but
Yeah,
unfortunately, there's been a few technical issues. So,
yeah,
second time lucky.
yeah,
So, for our listeners at home, tell us a bit about the horn. How did you come together?
yeah. So I guess I could start sort of just before uh the whole. My background is in acting, and then I sort of switched to being a singer when I was about 24 because I listened to David Bowie. I've actually got this record right here, Station to Station, and it's got Golden Years on it, and that
Oh,
track
brilliant.
really like got me. I was like, this is such a phenomenal album and a phenomenal track. And I think it was around about that kind of time I had a lot of time to kill in hospital, and I was just sort of listening to Bowie and just thinking he's a cool guy. So I just sort of started kind of thinking more seriously about a music career. And kind of cut to 2019, I was in this band with Danny and Alex, who were both in the horn. And that band was called Montreal, and that's just finished. And we sort of did a lot of DIY touring around like places like Germany and Holland, where there were really wonderful people who, they didn't care how big you were, whether you were a big band or a small band. And we kind of really cut our teeth playing intimate shows, um, and I was writing the songs for that, and then the boys were arranging that with me. And then we kind of nearly got somewhere, and then lockdown hit, and amazingly, Sir Elton John is our only sort of claim to fame. He actually just liked one of our tracks and put it on his Rocket Hour playlist,
Oh, wow.
and I think he may have we our label sent him our vinyl, so I think I think he's got one of our vinyls in his house somewhere. We think so. That's quite nice. And so yeah, it was lovely. That was a lovely sort of diamond in the rough moment. And then that kind of came to an end. But before that project, just because of like unavailability and it just the times change. But before Montreal finished, Danny, who had left the band by that point, he's an engineer, and Danny plays lead guitar on the horn now. But he owns he doesn't own it, but he runs full time a studio in Baker Street under this street called Chagford Street, sort of cobbled Harry Potter vibes street underground. He produces a lot of great stuff. He's worked with the Kooks, he's worked with lots of wonderful people, and Danny's a joy to work with. Basically, he called me up during lockdown, the kind of difficult sort of interstitial parts where we weren't sure are we allowed to work or are we like, what's going on. And then when the sort of lockdown lifted, Danny kind of got me into the studio and said, I've got this project with this guy called Nick True. Nick's a bit older than us, and he's got some songs that he's written, and I want you to just come, if you'd like to come and do some singing. So initially, it was literally just the horn. Literally, just started as a studio kind of session project for me and Danny, and it was almost like rejuvenating Nick's songs because he's a bassist, and Nick is this sort of enter Nick True. He's just like this incredible guy, like really unconventional. Made his he's done well in his business, which is not in music. But he, back in the day in the 80s, he was in a band called Friends of Gavin, who supported he went on tours with REM and the Smiths. He
Oh, brilliant. Wow. I mean, classic bands themselves.
supported the Smiths. So yeah, well, I think yeah, yeah. So he's got some stories, and basically there's a song called Passion that is the first single that the horn released, and he actually wrote that. He wrote the words and some of the melody for that in 1986, and that's when I was born. So he is this sort of. I think we were talking about this a couple of days ago. It's like there's a sort of intergenerational aspect to the band. It's sort of kind of like a time capsule. So that's certainly a unique aspect of the horn. And then Alex, the drummer from Montreal, we got him involved as well. And Ed is the keyboard player. He's amazing, and they're phenomenal musicians. All of these people. And Danny's friends with Ed, so then it became a quintet, and Nick organized the label with us. So we got an amazing kind of label services thing called Autonomy. They're a fantastic outfit. And we've got Cooking Vinyl we released. They're brilliant. And it's like Autonomy helped us to find a tour last year with Star Sailor. So I'd been playing like we'd all been playing, gigs in front of probably, ranging between sort of 50 people in the audience to maybe about 300 or 400 people in the audience. So some fun experience and some fun shows. But suddenly we were like as of last year, we were just thrust onto the stage, in the O2 Ritz in Manchester. It's 2,000 capacity. So I was initially quite like deer in the headlights. Yeah, it was like, oh wow, this is like suddenly kicking off. So it's quite an unusual project. I would say it is one the music industry in London that I think they're aware of the Horn because it's like it's quite an odd it's quite an odd one. It's the intergenerational aspect. It's like we've taken off quite quickly, and yeah, we're suddenly now and lo and behold, Scouting for Girls came is around the corner, and that was so lovely. And we wouldn't have been able to do any of that without our teams. So shout out to the teams, they're amazing. Yeah, so that's sort of you up to speed with the Horn, and we got loads of songs. We need to that album is just the beginning. So Nick basically writes most of it. I kind of help with the melody. Danny's very good at bringing in the right textures, but the three of us is a sort of core of the writing team, and I take the sort of melody department, Nick's in the lyrics department, and Danny's doing the textual and engineering stuff. But there is some crossover, so we do sometimes sometimes Danny writes or I help with production, or Nick helps with so it's sort of it's a nice triangle. And then it's sort of we managed to kind of essentially take it from the studio into a live thing. But the really unusual part is the intergenerational thing, and also kind of just how fast we went from like the studio to then suddenly playing in front of thousands of people. It was quite an odd trajectory.
I mean, I've got to ask. I mean, we mentioned a few influences of yours, like David Bowie, Sir Elton John, and I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned a fantastic track from David Bowie as well, like Golden Years. I mean,
Fantastic.
his songs were otherworldly. I've got to say. I mean, they were definitely not from this world.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, we're not going to get another one like him again. He was such a great singer, and he's also a
yeah,
great actor and producer as well.
yeah,
I've got to ask though, I mean, outside of David Bowie and
yeah,
Sir Elton John,
yeah.
if there was anybody that you could work with, I mean, new or old, who would it be?
Yeah. Did you ask me this last time?
I did ask you this last time, but I
Yes.
wanted to ask outside of David Bowie and
Yeah.
Elton John, if there was anybody else that you would like to work with.
Yeah, because I've always said before I find you a more appropriate answer. I've always said I've always wanted to just have a pint with William Shakespeare and David Bowie, just sit down with them, just for like a couple of hours. Even with certain and then even with other people like someone like yourself, we could imagine walking into a pub and just the two of us with a
Yeah,
vested interest in things like music and poetry, and just sit in an old tavern with them. That would be fun. Yeah, in terms of who, I've actually had a really wonderful meeting with shout out to a guy called Shuta Shinoda, who's a Japanese producer. I met him today for
oh,
another project, and he's great. So I do like to work with, I'd like to be working with people like him, and luckily, fingers crossed, I will be next year. He produced people like Daughter. I think they're really interesting. um, Ghost Poet he produced, and Hot Chip. So yeah, I'd say I'd be quite interested in working with someone like Kevin Parker potentially from Tame Impala. I reckon me and him could make a good record together. I'm sure I'm sure Kevin Parker has more important people to work with than me, but that would be a fun goal to aim for. Because I kind of understand. I think I understand the way he writes, and I enjoy the way he uses phase and modulation on his drums, and the way he uses the Prophet Fire. He just uses different he uses quite aggressively big synths,
yeah,
and creates a really lovely, as you heard Tame Impala. It's just he does create an other. Speaking of Bowie being otherworldly, I think Parker is a good contemporary example of someone who's creating his own world, and a lot of it's a huge swimming pool, and you go and swim in it, and it's beautiful, and it's velvety, and it's so full of color. It's probably, if you and I were to do some magic mushrooms and listen to Tame Impala, I'm sure that there'd be quite a lot of color that came from
yeah.
those sounds. So I think I am interested in working with sort of psychedelic psychedelic artists and pop and some sort of pop, lots of reverb, that kind of thing I've always been drawn to for some reason. And I think he was lifting influences from he kind of sounds like Lennon a bit sometimes, or he sounds like a modern version of some echo of some of John Lennon's solo work, like Dream Number 9. I think if you know that track is on Double Fantasy, and that's really heavily laden with synths. And yeah, so I find that to be, just quite seductive. I like that, and Danny as well. Danny and I enjoyed Currents when he won the International Brit Award for that. I think it was 2014. I think that really took everyone by surprise. That album, I think it was a really special album that he made. So yeah, I've definitely referenced Currents a lot, and I think a lot of bands, indie bands, who are exploring that type of sound on the West Coast and the East Coast and in England and in Europe have definitely referenced Tame Impala, and for good reason.
And you've got a new single that's come out called "Addicted to Love." But saying that, you also got an album called "People Like Us."
That's right.
So tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about that. Was
Yeah.
it quite a long process, or did it come together quite quickly?
I would say that it's because we weren't able to some bands are able to kind of jump in a studio for 2 weeks and write, maybe, they might have a space where they can write and then they can record it quite quickly. And it can be like an immediate process. But because of all of our different work and our different projects, we weren't able to do that. So it's definitely a case of me and Nick and Danny would often just meet up on a Sunday in Baker Street.
Yeah.
And then we'd have to sort of wait until next Sunday to kind of work on the track again, and
Sure.
So it was a longer process, to answer your question, I think, and that's fine because you're able to kind of, there's sort of pros and cons to that. It's like just like mull over the track after a week. There's always the danger, of course, of demoitis, and for any listeners who need more explanation of that, it's just the idea of when you write a song and record the song, the first recording that you have of it, you get really attached to and you don't want to change it. That's sort of what we would refer to as demoitis, and kind of always going back to the first version of the track. But when you're working by committee and you're not a solo artist, you kind of have to abandon that. You have to sort of be, what's the right word? You have to just be malleable to change. You have to accept change, because the track will change. It goes from like a voice memo to maybe me doing something on my laptop, then sending it to Danny. So we go from sort of phone to laptop to studio and desk. And then then we took some of them into Rack Studios with Danton Supple and Liam Hebb engineering this year. That was fantastic. So the tracks have really, it has been a kind of slow process of compiling an album together, but there's certainly more tracks. I think we've got like another 20 somewhere. So Rick Rubin put it interestingly. He said, when you're choosing tracks, don't try and pick, 15 or something. Try and sort of decide which 5 songs can you not live without. I liked that. I'm paraphrasing him, but that's essentially what he said. Which 5 or 6 songs can you not live without? And then that's your record. And then maybe you add a couple more that maybe fit with that aesthetic. So I think that's quite a good way of deciding how you put out a record. But yeah, in terms of how long it's been, it's certainly, this album has technically been sort of 2.5, 3 years in the making, but that's included getting everyone together and starting the project. So I would say next year we'd be able to crack out an album a bit quicker.
I've got to ask, with the album being in the making for 2.5 to 3 years, and especially with COVID times, that wasn't good. That were bad times for everybody. What were the challenges of with COVID? Do you feel like the music industry has changed during COVID times, and do you feel like it's changed for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I think that the excitement levels dropped because in everyone's project, because it became this sort of thing of, I think one of the main things were gigs, that it was like suddenly because I was performing for Montreal as well and for the Horn for 2 indie bands, but during lockdown that would translate to Instagram lives where it would just be someone having a glass of wine potentially on their own on their sofa, just watching a gig like this, just with a rectangle in their hand, which on one level is quite lovely that you can do that, and it's space age and it's pretty sick the first time. But then it got quite old quite quickly, I think, for a lot of people and for a lot of artists. And so I think the frustration aspect of not, one thing that music is wonderful at doing is bringing people together in the same room. And of
Yes.
course, without that, it was just Zoom screens. And obviously, we've agreed, though, it's lovely to be able to do an interview like this, remotely. That's important for things like radio, and always will be. But for things like going to gigs and stuff, it's just we haven't got another alternative yet.
Yeah.
Obviously, you and I were discussing a little bit of AI. I think tune into mine and Chris's podcast on AI, coming soon. But like, I think it's a case of just human connection. People want to feel the drum beat. They want to feel the kick drum in their chest. They want to smell the grass in the festival. They want to, they want to drink warm beer, and they want to put their arm around their mate listening to Bruce Springsteen. They don't want to
You
really
don't want to
stare at
see the computer
yeah.
screen. Yeah.
They've been working on a computer screen all day, probably, maybe, so they don't want to then consume music that way as well. They want to go and
Yeah.
feel it.
I
Yeah.
mean, I have seen a few gigs, like you say, on Zoom or YouTube. But again,
Yeah.
like you say, it's never the same as actually seeing it live. You just don't get that
Yeah.
same atmosphere, do you?
No, absolutely. And potentially, I think it does, even though it's obviously it's nice to be able to see, like, I've had the great pleasure of meeting someone who I really respect in the music industry called Matt Maltese. He's got, if you haven't checked, you may have checked him out already. If you haven't, go and check him out. He's fantastic. He's just got, he's a bit of a crooner. He's got great lyrics, and I really, really respect him. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting him at one of my brother's gigs, and we had a pint, and that was really nice. And then I watched one of his Instagram live performances, and that was nice. That I was barbecuing something outside my house, and it was still COVID times. And then I had Matt on my phone at like 3 p.m. So if you do connect with an artist, it is fun to experiment with different ways of consuming that music. But yeah, inherently it doesn't quite do the job, because you're also doing, like, you're doing Spotify on your phone, you're doing your messages on your phone, and you're also consuming music on your phone anyway. So it's like you want to have that sort of ethereal experience, and it's quite hard to have. We were talking about the metaverse, and
Yeah.
like what it might be like in 10 years time, and but even that, I don't know how close you can get to you know recreating some kind of experience. The sound of someone's voice when you hear it live, the sound of someone's guitar resonant, you can hear the pickup going in, you can hear all the warts and
Yeah.
everything. Whereas it's all very samey on it's like the portrait, everything has to be square or portrait, and it's all, so I think it sort of removes the uniqueness of it.
And I mean, I've got to talk. We've got to talk about this as well, because we are shortly running out of time. And
Yeah, sorry, that's me banging on.
no, no, at all, mate. I mean, I'm love to hear your answers. So thank you for sharing those with me. I want to talk about the tour, because you are currently
Yeah.
touring, but
Yes.
also you were opening for Scouting the Girls. So tell us a
Yeah.
bit about that. How did that come together?
Yeah, I don't actually know, Chris. I think it was just it was one of our teams, Autonomy. They have got they've got people in the right places. So I think Nick and we were sort of saying, can we try and get us a big tour this year? And they went, all right, all right, all right. We'll try our best, And I think that it sort of just came about at the right time. And yeah, so the label managed to sort it for us. So that's really cool. And I guess they were looking, our live set's quite active. It's got a lot of energy. So hopefully, Scouting for Girls, I'm guessing, I haven't spoken to them yet. I've messaged Roy on Instagram. He hasn't replied yet, but I'll meet him. I'll meet him next week. But I think, like, and it looks like they're having such fun. So I've seen, and our label was our lovely guy. Shout out to Jack Smith. Was just chatting to him earlier. He's one of the guys at the label, and he was just saying, like, how fun the tour looks. There's just a lot of people really engaging, and it's just I think those concerts are already, yeah, it's just humming away. It's electric. Quite the opposite of what we were saying Instagram Live. But I think that probably, you know, a band like Scanning for Girls would probably have to look at who was supporting them and just check that we were the right energy sort of
Sure.
fit. Is my guess. But to be honest with you, I'm quite removed from that process. I'm a lowly
Right.
singer, so I don't get told those kind of details. I'll try and find out more and get back to you.
I mean, I've got two more questions for you.
Yeah,
For our listeners at home who want to break into this kind of industry, the
yeah.
music industry, what advice would you give? And also, how difficult is it?
Oof. Well, first of all, I'm honoured to be asked such a sort of a question on which so much responsibility hangs. Uh, yeah, you got to feel it first. I think it starts with a feeling, and if you think that you are up for it and you love it enough, then yeah, start the journey. Um, get an instrument that you're really comfortable with, that you're comfortable writing songs on. Like that, for example, is my Spanish guitar that I bought in Camden Market for 25 quid, and I've written every song I've ever written is on that guitar. It's like a sort of old cardigan. So get an instrument that you like, I guess. Then probably write about something that feels a bit forbidden. Write about something that is a bit taboo. Write about something that you wouldn't tell your mates or your parents. Put that into a song, and if it brings you some form of relief or some form of euphoric ecstasy, or if it brings you some form of catharsis, you know, and you feel better after writing it, that's probably a good sign. Bruce Springsteen, I think, famously goes to therapy like every day or something, and he puts everything into his songs. You know, some of the best writers out there, the novelists, you know, they always say write about the stuff inside, you know, the stuff that you wouldn't normally be able to talk about. Put that in your book. Same with a song, I think. So do that. Then when you're happy with that, get yourself to a cheap studio, record it, and then go and have a chat with some local promoters in Sheffield or wherever you are, and um, set up a gig. Get someone to help you to bring some people along. Buy the promoter a drink. Be nice to people. Goes a long way. People don't often remember when you're nice, but they often will remember when you're not nice. So, and you know, we've all made mistakes sometimes, and yeah, be nice. And if you really love it, then it'll show, and the audience will respond to that. The people are clever; they'll see if you're enjoying yourself on stage or not, and you'll know if it's for you. And then, kind of the rest happens quite naturally if you really want it. I hope that that's it's not a concise answer, but that's my answer for today.
Well, Jonny, thank you very much for that. And my final question for you is, because we are quickly running out of time now, we've got 5 minutes left. So,
Yeah.
for my final question for you is, what would you like to say to our audience who is listening now?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Sheffield and the surrounding areas, for listening. We'll be playing in Leeds, close to you. Unfortunately, I don't think the show in Sheffield may be going ahead, but the one in Leeds is close to you, I hope. So come and see us scouting. Come and see us scouting for girls. And I can tell you when that is. That is, just get out the old cal. In Leeds, we're playing 23rd of November. So get yourself down there, come and have a beer and see what the horn's about. And thank you for listening to me.
And sorry, and before we go, where are you based in Leeds for your tour?
So we're playing the O2. We're playing Leeds O2 Academy
Right,
in
Jonny,
Leeds.
it's been a
Yeah.
pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Chris, it's pleasure's all mine, I promise you. Thank you so much for having me on.